17 minutes past 9, and it's time to talk high-tech.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Suckling on the teat of tech.
With Paul Brislen.
Yeah, indeed, Paul Brislen joining us this morning. Morning, Paul.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm very well, very well. Plenty to dig through in this week's world of technology, because it's been very busy out there.
Well, yes, very busy, yes. The Cold War's heating up again.
The Cold War, yeah. Apple versus another big technology company over some rights issues.
Well, that's right. So HTC is a Taiwanese-based handset maker for the mobile industry. They make a lot of the handsets that you see labelled as other things. So HTC makes phones for Vodafone, whom I work for. They also make the HTC devices that are coming up with the Google operating system, Android, on it. And Apple's legal action is against HTC, claiming that they have infringed on 20 of its patents, and it will be seeking full redress under the courts of law. Dom, dom, dom.
How can they?
The first shot is fired.
How can they sue someone for making a better phone than theirs?
Well, it's because HTC, I believe, also makes phones for Apple.
Oh.
So what Apple is saying is, righto, well, you guys are clearly breaching our patent. We've patented all of this stuff. You've got access to this kind of information from us, and now you're using it to make phones for other people.
Yeah.
We shall see you in court. And that's going to be very interesting to watch, because Apple and Google are becoming less and less friendly, if they ever were friendly at all, as the months have gone on. And the last few months in particular, the smartphone market is, smartphones, that's the cool end of the market at the moment. Everybody wants to get something that's an iPhone or a similar device out into the world.
Yeah.
And 3 years ago, the battle would have been Microsoft versus RIM with its BlackBerry products.
Yep.
Today, they're third and fourth. I mean, they're gone from the list and Palm has long since vanished from the market. It's all about Apple and it's all about Google. So when the two of them get into a stoush, it's going to have huge repercussions for the rest of the industry.
Interesting one to keep tabs on.
Yes, yeah. It's early days yet, so no doubt there'll be much bickering and whinging going on before it's all sorted. But yes, it's going to have a lot of fallout for the rest of the industry as people move into this sort of smarter area.
Yeah. Now let's talk about paying for content online, because the Financial Times has come up with a statement on this one.
Well, that's right. So the Financial Times is a UK publisher, of course, of business news. And there's a lovely story on the BBC. It's a blog about technology, actually, from a chap called Rory Cellan-Jones, who keeps up with such things. And he's noticed that the Financial Times is now getting more and more people subscribing to its online service. They're paying, and it's now worth about £20 million a year.
Wow.
And this question has long since been a big problem for publishers. Say you've got to go online, you've got to give away your content for free, you've got to install all these high-tech technology systems and IT systems and pay for bandwidth, and then you've got to give away your product for free. What's the business model in that? And of course, having trained all of the customers to expect everything for free, they're now busy scrambling trying to retrofit a subscription model. And NBR is the first off the blocks here in New Zealand. Some of its content is subscriber only. Some of its content is free as a bird. And they seem quite happy with that hybrid approach. Financial Times has done it slightly differently. Anybody can look at one story a month for free. If you register but don't pay, you can look at 10 stories a month for free. If you register, not only do you get to pay, but you also, and pay, I should say, you also get to read everything for free. You get an iPhone application that lets you access it all from the mobile. And they are seeing a huge uptake in numbers in that area, which I find quite fascinating.
Yeah.
Because as a former newspaper guy, this is the big issue, really. The thing that the FT does is it produces quality journalism that people want to read. And people will pay. Oddly, I know this may sound like blindingly obvious, but it's not, believe me. People will pay for stuff that they want. And if you're just churning out wire copy from, Reuters says a man in New York was arrested for keeping the corpses of his dead puppy in the bathtub for 6 years, nobody's going to pay for that. Nobody wants it. Nobody really cares. It's spurious news. But news that actually affects you, people will plunk down cash and say, yes, I'll read that and I'll pay for it.
Or content that you can definitely not get anywhere else.
That's right. Uniqueness. So instead of firing all the journalists and paying them less and less each year, perhaps the publishers would be better placed to hire some journalists and pay them more to do better news stories that will then in turn lead to people buying the copy online, which will lead in turn to earning some money instead of just hemorrhaging cash like they're doing at the moment with this bottom feeder mentality of journalism is the stuff that just takes up the space between the ads. Because let's face it, advertising online doesn't work. Nobody cares for it, nobody wants it. Unless it's very clever, I never click on an ad, and I've certainly never bought anything. Well, that's not true. Mr. Vintage does a very good line in social media stuff for the T-shirts, and I've bought a couple of T-shirts through there because the Twitter stream was so funny. But other than that, most traditional online advertising, banner ads and flashing, blinking things that annoy me, just annoy me.
But I mean, this works for the Financial Times, which is a large media organisation that has distribution channels throughout the world.
That's right.
But what about local New Zealand publications?
Well,
they only work on a local level.
Yeah, it's working quite nicely for NBR. They're similar to the FT in that they are primarily selling news to organisations where you can get your boss to pay for it, in effect.
Are they telling us that
I really need to see this.
Are they telling us that it's working, though? I mean, it's actually working? We don't
Well,
know.
they say it's working. I haven't badgered Chris Keel. Maybe you want to try that on my behalf, as he's the head of digital over there at NBR. But the editor and the owners seem to be quite pleased about it. NBR is one of the few papers that is actually hiring new staff and expanding its footprint. Interestingly, the other one is the ODT, the Otago Daily Times, and they are independently owned and have increased the size of their newsroom in the last 10 years, whereas most other newspapers in New Zealand have slashed the number of journalists in their newsroom by, I've heard horror stories out of some of the big ones of sort of 40 to 50% over the last few years.
Yeah.
And that, I think, as a reader, leads to less good news that I want to read, which means I read the newspaper less, which means, oh no, advertising doesn't get as much money, so therefore, quick, let's lay off a few more journalists, and it all goes down and down in a death spiral.
Yeah.
Hopeless idea, absolutely hopeless. They seem to have forgotten what people buy newspapers and magazines for, and they don't buy them for the ads. You sell their eyeballs to the advertisers, and if they're not there, you attract the eyeballs in with good content. If they're coming for that, then they'll get the advertising as well. But if they're not coming in for the good content, getting rid of the content producers isn't going to get you any more advertising.
Yeah.
It's just farcical.
Doesn't sound like rocket science.
No, well, you'd think not, would you?
Yeah, let's move on to MMORPG. What is that?
Yes, a massive multiple online role-playing game. And we're talking the likes of, back in the day, of course, it was EverQuest and World of Warcraft. Bless their cottons. What a needy bunch of people they are. These are the guys who sit in their mother's basements eating pizza and drinking beer and playing games online, probably, I would say, about 19 hours of the day.
Yeah.
And you would say they were a drain on the economy. But there's a fascinating, for those of us who care about such things, fascinating thing going on in the world of EVE Online, which is a massive space-based game where you have spacecraft. You can go out and mine asteroids for minerals, or you can interact with players, or you can ship cargo around this absolutely gorgeous to look at, but very, very serious universe that they've created.
All the usual spacey stuff.
It's real space opera kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what has happened is an Icelandic economist, Dr. Gudmundsson, of course, is monitoring the online economy of this game and using it as a kind of petri dish for real-world economies, and is learning an astonishing amount about what makes people buy things and what makes people tick as consumers. We've seen this quite a bit with the online stuff, where you can learn a lot because it's such a pure environment. There are no artificial requirements and artificial rules about it. He's in there studying it. Presumably, he's going to get a nice big grant from somebody to spend all his time playing games, which are sounds like a perfect life, really, doesn't it?
So he's basically been able to look inside the game and see how that reflects the real world and economies, and perhaps see how you can micromanage things, I suppose.
That's right, and how economies work with fewer rules in place, and how sometimes the rules lead to just the strangest of outcomes. One of the things he's doing is Eve in particular has some fairly entertaining swindles, for want of a better word, going on. Billions of what they call ISKs, the game currency, going missing because players are actually getting very clever at using the in-game mechanics to steal money off each other, to wipe out corporations overnight, and generally behave in quite an outrageous manner. And because there are no limits, and because nobody's actually getting really hurt, the game just lets this happen. It just runs in a very, very natural environment. So he's using his learnings from that to better educate himself and his students about what's going on in the real world, and why perhaps we get big surprises in the markets the way we do.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Paul.
Quite outrageous. Anytime. Thanks for that.
Twitter.com/Paul Brislen is where you'll